Resilience is the ability to deal with, find strengths in, and or recover from difficult situations. It includes our capacity to make the best of things, deal with stress and rise to the occasion. And I've got these images here, ball bouncing. People often think of resilience as bouncing back, the flowers growing in the sea of tarmac. So there's a sense of to be able to cope, to do our normal things in spite of difficult circumstances. But there's also an element of resilience which is about being able to be transformed through difficulty as well. And this image here of a butterfly. So these are some aspects of resilience. And what I want to begin with is us here now, is to invite you all into a thought experiment. And here's the thought experiment, that resilience is often thought as something that you have, or something that some people have and others don't. But if every time you face a difficult situation, you experiment with the idea that resilience is something that you do rather than have. And there are elements that we do have, but if we think of that, what's the doing side of resilience? And then ask yourself, what would a story of resilience look like here? And then see where your answer takes you. So our initial goal, we're going to be looking at this question, what would a story of resilience look like here? What would a story of resilience look like in 2020 when we're in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic? And it's helpful to think of other examples of stories of resilience we're aware of. And I'm just going to ask you to think of situations where there's been a difficult beginning to a story, where an adversity has been faced, but the way people respond to the adversity leads to a better than expected outcome. It might be a film you've seen or a book you've read. Just holding this question, what examples can I think of where there's been a difficult beginning that's been faced in a way that's led to a better than expected outcome? I see when I teach resilience, this is one of the places that I start. I invite people to think of examples of resilience that are familiar to them. So stories about resilience have been told for thousands of years, perhaps hundreds of thousands of years. And one of the reasons that they're told is because they pass on important lessons. And we as humans, we learn a lot by watching others. We learn through modelling. And when we hear stories of somebody, they faced this and responded in a way that led to a better than expected outcome, that gives us a reference point so that when we're facing something difficult, it kind of just opens a sense of possibility. So one of the things in a story of resilience, there's a sense of, okay, it might have a difficult beginning, but it's about responding in a way that leads to a better than expected outcome. And what you're doing with storyboarding, this is a skill that I'd like to introduce, is that you're mapping out a sequence that has a difficult beginning, but that leads to a better ending. And we don't know that we will have a better ending. There's no guarantee here. We face enormous uncertainties at the moment. But if in our minds and hearts we can hold the possibility of, okay, this is difficult now, but if I do this or if I do that, I can make a better than expected outcome more likely to happen. That's really what leads us into the steps and the strategies and the practices that support resilience. Now, in any story, there's a central character, and I work with the me, you and us model of well-being, the me, you and us model of resilience. And I like to draw on that here because here you might be thinking, well, okay, I'm interested in my own resilience, but I know that many of you also support others. It might be family members, but it might be professionally, whether you're coaches or health professionals or youth workers, whatever the role that you're in, that there's a you side, which is about supporting resilience in others. But also what brings us here today is that there's an us side, that there's a collective threat we all face. And there's a larger collective story about resilience, which is about, here's us facing this. Let's talk together about what helps us in this situation. And so what I'm wanting to introduce is a tool of storyboarding based on 6 parts. I call it 6-part storyboarding. And if you've got a bit of paper handy, I'm going to invite you just to divide your paper into 6 compartments like this, and we're going to work through this in this webinar. Well, I call it the shift storyboard, where each of those letters in shifts stands for a different element in a story of resilience. And the first S is the starting point. Here's me facing, or it could be here's us facing. Then the H is for hopes. The I is for the obstacles and difficulties in the way of our hopes. So a sentence that begins, in the way obstacles and difficulties include. And then the F is facing that, what helps is. And that's a large part of resilience training work, is really looking at what helps when we're facing something difficult. And in great stories, they often have difficult beginnings, but there are turning points along the way. And those turning points are difficult to predict in advance, but you might have examples in your own life where you face something difficult and there was a point in the story where you think this is never going to change, it's never going to work out, but it did. And those are important examples because they remind us that even if we can be absolutely certain that something's not going to work out well at the start of a process, we can be surprised and we can surprise ourselves. And so then it's looking at, well, what can we do that makes a turning point more likely? And that's where the last part of the storyboard is about looking at the specific steps we can take in the next 7 days.